Well, it is draft week, which means we're spinning, finning, and winning on the Big D podcast. Before we bring in Alex to talk all things Dolphins, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page where might be golf, it might be football, might be baseball, might be oh wait, eight, any number of sports. Also, check out the Big D podcast, Spotify, and Apple. So, joining us, the only guy who likes the NFL draft as much, maybe a little bit more than me.
What's up, Dylan? Always a pleasure to be back on the show with you. And it's an exciting time in the NFL offseason. Obviously, everyone's looking forward to the draft. You get your new rookie pieces coming in right after free agency, and really get the wheels rolling on the lead up, the long and dreaded lead up coming up into training camp, and eventually some preseason football. So very excited for the draft on Thursday.
So, who are the Miami Dolphins going to draft this year? You're going to draft Ted Ginn Jr. again? Oops.
Oh yeah, definitely not him. We've had our fair share of Ted Ginn Jr. in the past. I think we can skip out on anything like that. Don't see a receiver being the day one draft choice for the Miami Dolphins, but
I can attest. Justin Blackman didn't go well for us a few years past.
yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. I think he just got arrested the other day, didn't he? I think I saw him pop up in the news. Definitely wasted talent there, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I mean, definitely a lot of options. I've been seeing mock drafts everywhere. It's mock draft central around this time of the year, and there's definitely a couple different directions I think Miami can go. I mean, you want me to get right into it?
Yeah. By the way, it is true. Doug Blackman arrested and charged with public intoxication, but that's either near there right now. Miami goes into the draft with the 13th pick in Thursday's first round, and there have been a lot of discussions over what Miami has done or maybe hasn't done lately because all every discussion, and I know a lot of people on the other side lived there for 3 years, has been negative over Miami. Let's talk good and bad. Anything good about the Dolphins as you approach draft day?
Ah, I mean, the good about the Dolphins approaching draft day is there's an immense amount of talent on the roster. I mean, you can pick names off of this roster that any NFL franchise would be happy to have. I mean, obviously, guys like Tyreek Hill. I mean, coming off of an off year. I'm still expecting to see more out of Tyreek than we saw last year. Jalen Waddle. I mean, he's still one of the top wide receiver twos in the NFL. You've got a strong running back room with Devon Achane, who's going to be at the I'm sure top end of fantasy football drafts this season. Even Jalen Wright, who I'm excited to see coming into his second year. Tua Tagovailoa, there's a lot of expectation on him, and as long as he can stay healthy, what he can do. That's just on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, there's talent on the defensive side. Zach Sealer had a fantastic season last year. We've got a couple younger pieces, Chop Robinson. There's a lot of talent on this football team. Even still, I know Mike McDaniel's his seat's been getting a little warmer and a little warmer, but we've seen the creativity that he's brought to the team. Obviously, some clock management issues and a couple. I mean, he's got to have the worst challenge success rate of any head coach in the NFL because I never see that man win challenges. But there's definitely some things he needs to work on. But we've seen what that offense can do under Mike McDaniel when all the wheels are clicking, when all the wheels are turning and the pieces are clicking. So, there is a lot to ideally be excited about, when it comes to this Miami Dolphins team. I think bringing back Anthony Weaver as a defensive coordinator is going to be a really nice consistency check. When it comes to having a defensive coordinator returning for a second year, I know he was in the mix for a lot of head coaching spots. So, there is a lot of positives on paper when it comes to the Miami Dolphins this year. Unfortunately, this offseason has been littered with negative news pieces, whether it's Tyreek Hill's drama or the Jalen
Oh,
Ramsey.
that leads us here. Let's talk about what's been a bad last couple of weeks PR wise for the Dolphins. Jalen Ramsey seemingly one what rumor you hear whether he wants to leave the Dolphins or the Dolphins don't want Jalen Ramsey there. Tyreek Hill, there's a question whether or not the Dolphins going to trade. And I think back to last year, didn't my that the Dolphins gave both of those guys big contracts, and now there's a chance one or both of them on the roster. Did Miami have to give Ramsey and Cheetah big contracts at that time?
No, they didn't. And obviously, with the season that Tyreek Hill had 2 years ago, where he was chasing 2,000 yards receiving, he ends up being the number one player in the NFL top 100. Like, I understand wanting to reward the season that he had there. However, Tyreek Hill has said publicly that retirement is an option for him at any point. So that for that reason alone, you add on, the off the field. I don't even know if you want to call it issues. It's more drama than I would say issues because it seems like a lot of the things that he gets into, he never. It's not like he's getting arrested. Like obviously Tyreek Hill has a rap sheet, and there's history there, but to
Yes.
yeah, but it really seems like the biggest concern with Tyreek Hill is more of the drama than actual legal issues. I mean, a lot of it seems like the scuff ups kind of seem to be more of a scuff up as opposed to, some severe penalties, at least recently. But when it comes to Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, who will be the receiver face of the face of the receiver room moving forward long term with the Dolphins. Obviously, you want to keep him on the team, but to give him a contract like that when there's so many other needs that needed to be addressed. I mean, Chris Greer laughed off the Miami Dolphins media last offseason about how he was saying that the media was more concerned about the offensive line than he was, and the front office was. There's so many more pieces that we needed to fix as opposed to just giving Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, a payday. So, this all stems back to Chris Greer, and I'll probably be going on a rant about that later on in this episode. But the short answer after my long answer is no. There was not a need to give Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey those extensions, and now we just look stupid with Tyreek Hill's frustrations after the season last year and even trickling into the offseason with some Twitter comments. In my opinion, I think those are a little bit more of Tyreek Hill just having fun on Twitter and stirring the pot. He has publicly said that he's committed to the Dolphins this season. I don't think we're going to be moving on from Tyreek Hill. Now, Jalen Ramsey is a different story.
And then with Ramsey, I mean Ramsey's still a capable player, but what's going on with him? Like, do the Dolphins want him out? Does Ramsey want to leave?
According to Chris Greer in his press conference, he met with the media the day that the news really broke. There was rumblings and kind of rumors about it the couple days leading up to it, but the day the news officially broke, Chris Greer had a press conference, and in his conference, he said it wasn't Jalen Ramsey coming to us asking to be traded. It was and Chris Greer, and this is a summary of his words, but our people met with his people, and at the end of the conversation, it seemed like this was the best way moving forward for both of us. I don't understand how that conversation can come to that conclusion if Jalen Ramsey was not the one who brought it up, which Chris Greer claims he wasn't. In my mind, sitting where you are as the general manager of the Miami Dolphins, you just gave Jalen Ramsey an extension. He didn't have the greatest year last year, but he's still, at the very least, a depth piece, which is crazy to say about Jalen Ramsey considering he's a multi-time All Pro and Pro Bowl cornerback. But the Miami Dolphins have had injury problems at the defensive back position, multiple injury problems at the defensive back position over the last couple of years. At the very worst, Jalen Ramsey is a body and a depth piece. And at the very best, if you get the top of performance from Jalen Ramsey, you're looking at one of the best cornerbacks at his peak in the game right now. So it just doesn't make sense for me from a Miami Dolphins fan perspective of why the Dolphins would want to move on from Jalen Ramsey. Obviously, they're not going to get the haul that they paid to bring him in. You're probably looking at a fourth round pick or something like that. If you trade Jalen Ramsey for draft picks, and I'm taking this straight from Barry Jackson, one of the most reputable Miami Dolphins beat reporters, he tweeted, trading Jalen Ramsey for a draft pick or picks would raise his Dolphins cap hit from 16.6 million to 25.2 million if they take the hit this year, and leave Miami with only $7 million in space, barely enough to sign a draft class and practice squad, while realistically needing 5 to 8 starters. So you're going to take a cap hit, you're going to trade away at his peak, one of the more talented players on your team, a year after giving him an extension, at a position where you've had injury problems over the last couple of years. Nothing about this makes sense. I don't see how Chris Greer would lie in this press conference and and say that Jalen Ramsey didn't ask to be traded. So I to answer, I don't know the answer. It does none of it makes sense to me. Why would it doesn't make sense financially to move on from him? It doesn't make sense from a depth and team perspective and a roster spot perspective to move on from him. I it just it I'm really lost when it comes to this Jalen Ramsey situation.
Yeah, especially when Miami would actually incur a cap hit by trading Ramsey. It's not like in other not like in other moves where a team would gain cap flexibility. Like if the Cowboys wanted to trade Dak Prescott, they'd be in salary cap. You know what? And it starts with four letter word that's not going to be named here.
Right. I mean, the only way you move on from these high profile, big name, big price tag players is to save cap space. That's the reason why you do it. Obviously, I mean, if you think you can get value from him for them in a trade, sure. But the big reason to move on from these big contract guys is to save money. And if you're not saving money and you spent so much to get him in the first place, you're not going to get a fraction of it back. It just doesn't make any sense. We already moved on from Kendall Fuller, who had a decent year last year. He had some injury problems last year, but he was the cornerback too, across from Jalen Ramsey, and again, at a position where we've had injury problems in the past. Moving on from him, who was a solid cornerback on that team, and now trying to move on from Jalen Ramsey, I just don't know what their plan is with the secondary. Kader Kohu just signed a contract with the Browns today. We moved on from Brandon Williams. We've moved on from Javon Holland. I mean, our starting safeties right now are guys I've never heard of, and I don't even know who's going to be starting at cornerback week one this season. The moves that they're making with this secondary, unless they're planning on going corner or safety, with the first two picks of the draft, which I don't even necessarily agree with. I mean, there are a couple safeties who I've seen mocked to Miami, which again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but there's so much more holes on this team that Dolphins fans have been begging for, aka an offensive line. It just these moves this offseason have given me so much less confidence moving into this season than off seasons past.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we've seen teams. I think the Philadelphia Eagles have been super aggressive in signing guys early. Now, some deals might not work, but given Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, all those guys to back, guess what? The Eagles still could afford Jalen Barkley or Jalen Carter. I mean, maybe Miami went after the wrong guys.
I mean, I guess that's what it's got to be. Is this is Chris Greer saying, "Hey, we made a mistake with these signings, and we're going to move on from it and start over fresh." But you've already kind of dug your own grave. I mean, you kind of have to lay in it at some point. I mean, there's only so many mistakes you can back out of while still being able to field a football team that can win football games. I mean, this is a Miami Dolphins team who 2 years ago was number one in NFL rankings at some point in the regular season. I mean, obviously last season was a down year. Tua gets hurt, and the expectations for the Dolphins have tanked. But you just think back 2 years ago. I mean, Tua and Tyreek looked like the best offensive weapons in the NFL. I mean, it's just been such a downward spiral over the last 6 months. It's just shocking to me.
Miami's problems have started when the Dolphins did not sign a couple key free agents in a couple of key free agents they drafted, whether it be Robert Hunt or Christian Wilkins, or last year Javon Holland. Guess what good teams do? They sign key guys. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs are never going to let Pat Mahomes get anywhere near free agency. The
No.
Bills gave Josh Allen a big contract. The Ravens gave Lamar Jackson a big contract. If and when Jaden Daniels gets a big contract, guess what the Washington Commanders are going to do? Probably sign. Why didn't Miami take care of Hunt, Wilkins, and Ramsey early?
It's a
Not
fantastic.
Ramsey, Holland early.
It's a fantastic question, Dylan, and that's the biggest head scratching part to me is Chris Greer gets a lot of criticism, and I am right there along with it. At this point, I don't see a future for Chris Greer in Miami. But the biggest thing that I will say about Chris Greer is he drafts well. Overall, he makes strong draft pick selections. I mean, I have our history of Chop Robinson was a hit. Jalen Wright is looking like he's going to be a hit, and that's a fourth round pick. Malik Washington had some really good showings last year, and that's a sixth round pick. You go back the year before, you get guys like Devon Achane. You go the year before. I mean, Skylar Thompson almost beat the Buffalo Bills in a playoff game. Obviously, didn't last too long there, but it was a potential decent option. And then 2021, obviously, with the Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, Hunter Long, we drafted, who was actually a part of the trade package that brought Jalen Ramsey to Miami. And then, of course, 2020, bringing in Tua Tagovailoa and Robert Hunt. He has a pretty decent history when it comes to making good selections. The problem is he doesn't keep it. And the number one name that we haven't spoken about so far when it comes to losing talent that you drafted is Andrew Van Ginkel. I mean, the, the money that Andrew Van Ginkel was paid by the Minnesota Vikings was so attainable for Miami to pay. And look at the season he had last year with the Vikings. It was, I mean, he was one of the most dominant defensive players in the NFL last season under that Brian Flores defense.
There are inexcusable mistakes from players. There are inexcusable mistakes by teams. Andrew Van Ginkel's a perfect player, and yet, we'll let him. Oh wait, who did I see return a pick six from Aaron Rodgers in London last year? It wasn't Harrison Smith. It was
Andrew Van Ginkel, and he was doing it in Miami. It's not like he was just a mid-tier player when he was in Miami, and they said, maybe we don't want to, see how this story ends. He was one of the best defensive players we had that season. He was doing the same thing he was doing in Minnesota, in Miami, and they just decided to let him walk. And another name we haven't even mentioned from the same draft in the same trenches is Christian Wilkins. Now I understand Christian Wilkins had a phenomenal season, and he was going to get paid. And Miami probably, with the choices that they had made that offseason, there was probably not enough money in the budget to give Christian Wilkins what he was looking for on the open market. However, it's just another example of a homegrown guy, and talk about a fan favorite. I mean, Christian Wilkins, Dolphins fans loved Christian Wilkins. Now, how could you not? He's got one of the best mic'd up YouTube videos of all time. And again, I understand you can't, he was asking a lot and he deserved it. And, it was unfortunate to see him get hurt last year, with the Raiders, but it's just another name that you can add to the list of players that, you see the potential in, you see the development growing, and then you just get to see them take off and perform with another team. And I'll even give you a farther throwback. How about Minka Fitzpatrick? Another electric talent that the Miami Dolphins drafted, who just decided they didn't want to reap the benefits of the work that they did.
Did get a first round pick from Minka Fitzpatrick,
right? Yeah, and I understand, of course, but it's nice when you can get paid adequately for it, but when you let them go in free agency, like you do Andrew Van Ginkel and a lot of these guys, it's head scratching moves by Chris Greer. And it's questions that I can only question, and I wish I had more answers for.
And yet Miami not only spent a first round pick, but then gave Bradley Chubb a big contract, and that hasn't exactly worked out.
Yeah, that's sending that first round pick for Bradley Chubb was. it's hard to say it's the worst mistake Chris Greer's made over the last decade because there's been so many, but it's got to be up there as far as top 2 or 3. We could have done so much more with that first round pick that we gave away for him, and the return on that investment has just been he's been hurt, and even when he's been on the field, he's made some good plays, but not enough for what we paid for him.
And then unfortunately, Jalen Phillips has been hurt, so it's like, I mean, at least Shot Robinson looks good, but maybe Miami's pass rushing situation will be okay this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's still talent on the defensive line. There's still talent at the at edge and pass rush. I'm really hopeful for Jalen Phillips to make yet another recovery. We've already seen him, have to go through a full recovery on his first injury, and Dolphins fans know there was nothing harder than seeing him go down again because he wants it so bad. He's obviously playing for the University of Miami. He's kind of a local legend, for the city of Miami, and just another great guy along with Christian Wilkins, who's a fan favorite, and he's had some really rough history when it comes to injuries, and there's always hope that Jalen Phillips will be able to get back to because when he's on the field, he's one of the most dominant pass rushers in the NFL, and I will say that unbiasedly. It's just unfortunately he's got a bit of an injury bug as we've seen, and hopefully he can get over that. But again, another great pick, and obviously the injuries aren't something Chris Greer can control, but it's just another, unfortunate side of being a Miami Dolphins fan.
And one area that for whatever reason, and I've said this for like a couple years now, why have the Dolphins seemingly ignored offensive line in the draft? Because guess what Tua's got? He's got injury history both with the hip and the head. And apparently Miami forgot about both.
Yeah, I think most Dolphins fans expected Teron Armstead to retire this offseason. I don't think anyone was surprised when we got the announcement there. And it's even more telling that I've been asking the Miami Dolphins to fix the offensive line my entire life. We've never had an offensive line. I mean, we've always had one or two guys, whether it be Jake Long, whether it be Laramie Tunsil, whether it be Teron Armstead, but the full offensive line as a unit has never been anywhere near good enough to win football games. I think that's been the basis of the Dolphins' mediocrity over the last 2 decades is really not being able to solidify that offensive line. I know that Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel, and the decision makers behind the Miami Dolphins are either hoping or expecting Patrick Paul, our second round pick last year, to fill in, for that Teron Armstead hole. But it is a massively big hole that Teron Armstead leaves. He's only on the field for 8 to 14 games a year, but when he is, that you can rely on him. And, I think Patrick Paul has the tools to be able to be a solid offensive lineman and an offensive tackle for the Miami Dolphins and in the National Football League. But, there's got to be more answers to that question because the moves that we made this offseason are not enough so far, to put that offensive line in a situation where I'm comfortable with Tua Tagovailoa standing behind it.
Okay. Yeah, Miami signed James Daniels, Aaron Brewer as center, but the tackle positions could be all over the place. Tackle, guard, could be anyone.
Yeah, guard is definitely one of the biggest holes. I am intrigued by the James Daniels signing. I mean, the unfortunate thing about it is he's coming off a blown Achilles, I think, from his time in Pittsburgh. So from everything I've heard, I didn't know a whole lot about James Daniels before the signing, but it sure sounds like he was pretty much the strongest offensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers before his injury. That's a tough injury to come back from. So, hopefully he can, come back to where he was and play at the level he was playing at before his injury. But, Chris Greer loves taking chances on players with injury history. So, it doesn't seem to very often work out. Hopefully this one will, but I can guarantee you that within the first 2 days there will be an offensive lineman be called at the draft for the Miami Dolphins. We just got to hope it's the right one.
So 13th pick. Um, I mean, what do you see as the biggest holes of the team? Um, Running back, probably not. Wide receiver, no. Offensive line, yes. Secondary, probably. Defensive tackle, probably. Anywhere else?
Secondary, like you said, specifically cornerback. I think we're definitely going to have to bring in a cornerback through the draft. We're going to need a safety as well. We could use another linebacker too. We let a couple linebackers go. We do have a couple strong pieces there, but we definitely could use a couple more pieces in the linebacker room. Like you said, I think we will draft a receiver at some point in the draft. We have obviously moved on from Braxton Berrios. We did bring in Westbrook Akine from
What's your team?
Akine from the Titans, which I think will be a nice addition. I do still think we will make a later wide receiver pick. Running back, you got to be happy with the room there, unless somehow Ashton GNC falls, to 13. Then you got to make a decision because I think, if you want to go best player available and Ashton's sitting there at 13, it might be worth it. It might be worth it. Oh my, it's hard for me to say it, but we did struggle very, very severely last year on 3rd and 1s, 3rd and inches, 4th and 1s, 4th and inches. Having a guy like Ashton Jeanty in that backfield as kind of a change of pace back and a different body style, as Devon Achan and Jalen Wright, I think could be very beneficial for the offense, but it's not the biggest hole. Obviously, the biggest hole is the offensive line, is the secondary. I think linebacker's a big need. I've seen a lot of people say Miami could be looking at a tight end. I think, obviously Johnny Smith had a fantastic year last year, but we could use another inline blocker. We let Durham Smythe go this offseason. So someone who's a little bit more block focused, let Johnny Smith run the right routes almost as a slot receiver, big body receiver. I do see the Dolphins, making a play at tight end later in the draft, but as you said, the biggest holes there are definitely offensive line and secondary. I don't see any possible situation to where they don't go offensive line or secondary in the first round of this draft.
Um, who do you want the Dolphins to take with that 13th pick in Green Bay?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's the question. Before I answer that, before I give you a couple of names who I'm looking at, I will say recent history, the 13th pick has done pretty well for us. Christian Wilkins was the 13th pick, which obviously, in the short time we had him, he more than enough paid for that draft position. And then obviously the famous Laramie Tunsil slide after the gas mask bong video dropped right before the draft. Miami picked Laramie Tunsil at the 13th pick of the draft. So we do have some good history at that position. Obviously, Dan Marino being the number one legend of the team wearing 13. It's a number that has brought the Miami Dolphins good juju in the past. So I'm hoping we can keep that going this year. Um, in my opinion, I think offensive line is the biggest need for the Miami Dolphins going into this year. I would like to say I'm confident in Patrick Paul being the fill-in replacement at left tackle, but I wish there was better guards at the top half of this draft. I really wish that there was a guard I could confidently say this is the plug and play fill starter that we need. But it seems to be a bit more of a tackle heavy front half of the first round. So names that have really stood out to me: Kelvin Banks. If he's there at 13, I'm sure Miami will have done plenty of research on Kelvin Banks. I think he could be an option at the 13th pick. Um, Armand Membu, I doubt he'll be there at 13. I've seen him going in the top 10 in most mock drafts from what I've seen. I wouldn't be upset about that pick. Will Campbell seems to be pretty much. I've seen him as high as 4 to New England. I've seen him, as low to even going behind Miami, in some mock drafts. But I think those are the top 3 names that that I would be most intrigued with, when it comes to that name that Roger Goodell is going to be calling at 13 for Miami. I mean, I think Kelvin Banks is kind of falling right around that range where wouldn't be surprised if we saw that pick there. Like I said, I mean, I think Armin Mambu would be a blessing if he dropped. Same with Will Campbell. I could see, if either of them slide, if there's a weird, quarterback run or anything like that. I mean, it's probably not obviously not the draft for that, but you never know. Maybe guys like Tyler Warren are going to be jumping ahead, and teams will be taking chances on Ashton Jeanty and a couple offensive linemen slide through the cracks. But I think those are kind of the three big names I've been focused on. As I said earlier, if Ashton Jeanty's there at 13, I think you have to give it a thought. I think that the performance that he put up in college is one of the most electrifying running back tapes that I've seen. I don't care who you're playing for. I don't care who you're playing against. The numbers that he put up are ridiculous. So I would say, Jeanty as a fun pick would be, an exciting pick. But when it comes to, what I want to see the Miami Dolphins do, I want to see offensive line. I've seen a couple safety names come out. I've seen Malachi Starks get mock drafted to Miami. I've seen, who's the cornerback?
Aaron?
Yeah, Barron, I've seen mock to Miami. Even Will Johnson, I've seen mock to Miami. So, I mean, if they went secondary, the biggest thing from what I've been looking at is I think offensive line is a little deeper than the cornerback position this year. So I could almost see if they wanted to go secondary first because they feel that they can find a better second round lineman than a better second round corner or safety, whatever it may be. That's the only reason why I would say don't go offensive line in that first pick. But you got to fix the offensive line first and foremost. And to me, it's the biggest hole and it's the biggest need on that Miami Dolphins roster.
I think Miami's got to get a tackle. I mean, Banks makes sense. I think any of the tackles would make sense. I think Campbell's the best pure left tackle. I think Membu can be a road runner right tackle. Banks was nicked this year at Texas, but I think Banks has got a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. I mean, I did a mock draft for Miami, a full 7-round mock draft, and Kelvin Banks was my first round pick. I mean, he was there at 13, and it just seems to be. Chris Greer said going into this offseason he will be addressing the offensive line. He's made a couple mid-tier additions through free agency. You got to think if he's going to stay true to his word, he's going to be going offensive line heavy in this draft. So
and then Miami won't go until the 7th round.
Yeah, I mean, and the great thing, we've got a lot of picks this year. I mean, if we go 6 rounds without seeing an offensive lineman, I'm not watching a game next year. I'll tell you that right now. Unless the Dolphins make a trade for Lane Johnson or Mailata or something, I'm not watching a Dolphins game this year if we don't take a lineman within the first 6 rounds.
So then the Miami Dolphins are going to end up playing on Thanksgiving again. They're going to send you to Pittsburgh or whatever. I don't even. Yeah, you do play the Steelers this year.
Yeah, we do. Yep. But yeah, I mean, as far as first round goes, those are really the names I'm expecting. I think it's got to be an offensive line. If not, I mean, if they don't go offensive line, cornerback, or safety, you may as well just tell Chris Greer to go home now because there's nothing more important than those spots for the Miami Dolphins. Unless, like I said, I mean, it's hard not to want Ashton GT with the numbers that he put up last year at Boise State or throughout his time at Boise State. So if he's there and you want to go best player available and he's at the top of your draft board, it would be concerning, but it would be exciting. That's what I'll say about that. And don't draft Tyler Warren. Let someone else have him. Let someone else enjoy him. He's not going to be there at 13 anyway. And
Miami drafted Ashton Jeanty. It'd be like the year Detroit. It'd be like when Detroit went wide receiver 3 straight first rounds.
Yeah.
And Matt Millen's son said a few years later, and I quote, "The buffoon," and I quote, "The buffoon just picked another wide receiver," end quote.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just
Huh.
with those numbers and that body type, it's hard to not want him. I mean, so again, it would be Dolphins fans would have a riot if that happened, but it would be exciting. I know the Dolphins fans would like to see it. Would like to see him wearing a Dolphins uniform. It just unless they trade back into the first round, I don't see it happening.
So, usually when you and I get together, we, one of us is ranting. And I know you're ranting. And I don't know, and I don't care if it's Dolphin based, I don't care if it's Chris Greer based, I don't care if it's Mike McDaniel, Tua, Cheetah, Ramsey, go ahead.
It's all of it, Dylan. I mean, and I've already let out a lot of it, but listen, I was born in the year 1996. Dan Marino retired in 2000. I never saw Dan Marino play. I had his jersey as a little kid, but I never saw the man throw a football past what I could remember. The first quarterback I remember the Miami Dolphins having, the first quarterback I remember watching as a fan of the Miami Dolphins was Jay Fiedler. And since then, it has been nothing but pain and misery. There's been no offensive line. There's been no consistent quarterback play. I mean, being a Miami Dolphins fan post 2020 has got to be one of the most depressing things that anyone can ever go through as far as a sports fan. I mean, no playoff wins, not a single playoff win. The closest game we came to winning the playoffs was with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, losing by 3 against the Buffalo Bills. I mean, it has just been one of the most horrific, unsuccessful stretches in NFL history when it comes to playoff win droughts. And Chris Greer has been in charge of the Miami Dolphins decision making for almost that entire time. I mean, I know he's been with the team since around 2000. I know he wasn't the GM until maybe a decade later than that, but he has been part of the decision making process, and he has been the decision maker for the better part of the last 2 decades. And there has to be something that changes. I've been so excited since the Tua Tyreek era started. It seemed like we had all of the pieces to finally turn something around, and it has just crumbled in front of me. And I've gotten to the point to where I'm really not even excited for the Miami Dolphins football season this year. I know things are going to go wrong. I realistically could see this team being a 500 football team this year. It's been so depressing seeing the moves that the Dolphins have decided to make this offseason and the drama with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey and the just having to accept that Tua is probably going to be knocked unconscious at some point in this season, and we're going to be watching Zach Wilson throwing the football for the Miami Dolphins. It's I don't really know what to say anymore other than there needs to be some changes. There needs to be changes at the top. And when I say the top, I definitely mean Chris Greer, but I also mean Stephen Ross. He's made the Miami Dolphins facility great, and he has made it a hot spot destination for events, whether it's World Cups, whether it's F1 races, whether it's, concerts, Taylor Swift, whatever you want to say. Sure, he's turned Hard Rock Stadium into a great venue, but he does not have a professional football team that is capable of holding up to the stage that he's set there. And I understand that he's building value into the brand and into the facility as a whole. But when it comes to what Miami Dolphins fans want is wins and playoff wins and success. And I haven't seen it my entire life. And it's time for changes, in my opinion. I think going into this season, this is the last year that you can give Tua without having to make a decision. I think if he doesn't play 16 football games next year, it's time to find someone else, because the best ability is availability, and he's got all the tools in the world. But if he can't stay healthy and he can't be on the field to win football games for the Miami Dolphins, then you may as well find someone else who can. And if you're going to get rid of Tua, you're probably going to get rid of Mike McDaniel, and at that point, get rid of Chris Greer, and you might just have to blow it up. I'm giving them this season to see if there's hope. And if Tua stays healthy and Tyreek Hill rebounces or bounces back, and Devon Achane continues to be, the electrifying piece he is, and maybe there's some holes in the defense, and say this offense comes back to what we saw 2 years ago, but we lose a couple games to a defensive collapse, and there's a couple holes you can fill in the defense. That's the only way I see moving forward that this team can stay where it is and plug in a couple holes on the defensive side of the ball, and hopefully we make some moves to make the offensive line serviceable, if not more than that. But I think this offseason this upcoming season is going to be a fate determiner for a lot of people who associate themselves with the Miami Dolphins, whether that's fans, whether that's players, whether that's general managers, whether that's coaches, and whether that's owners. We need to see success this season, or else I think a lot of people are going to be looking for a new job next year.
And then Gloria Stefan will be running the Miami Dolphins next year.
Alex Rodriguez, Serena Williams, any of these celebrity minority stake owners, I mean, they could probably do a better job than Chris Greer at this point. So, give them a shot. Who knows? Maybe they might know a thing or two about a thing or two. I'll take the job. You don't even have to pay me that much. I'll take $50K a year, and I bet you I could do a better job than Chris Greer's done.
Ooh, I'll do it for 10.
5, just for the fun of it.
I'll pay to get a Super Bowl in Miami.
But that's about it. I've pretty much hit on all the points. I don't understand what we're doing with Jalen Ramsey. I wish Tyreek Hill would just shut up and not shut up. I like his personality, but he just says too much sometimes, and he doesn't help his own case, and he doesn't help his own cause.
You're saying Cheatham might be a diva.
I think it's been known he's been a diva for quite some time now, but I hope Tua can stay healthy. I hope the offensive line can block. I hope Jalen Phillips can stay healthy. But at this point, I really don't have the expectation that any of that's going to happen. I've seen enough, and I've seen enough losses, and I've struggled through enough to where at this point, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. So if they want to prove it to me, go ahead. I'll be watching and I'll be waiting, but I'm not holding my breath anymore. That's for sure.
Okay, Alex, thanks for spinning, and winning with me, and maybe Miami will start the rebound this Thursday night.
We'll see. Well, we can only hope, Dylan. Thanks for having me as always, and as always, fins up.
On you.